The first is at 9, a briefing about the numbers Mr. Foster provided from the finance department on Friday. At 9:30, the head of marketing for Cortland Comfort will be stopping by to discuss the last changes to the summer campaigns. 10:30, did you do anything fun yesterday? Sebastian interrupted. Sir, I gritted out, trying to get him on task. I would not talk about how I'd alternated between anger and masturbating after he'd left my place. Would you like to hear what I did with my Sunday? Sebastian waggled his eyebrows at me, and I got the impression that there were some distinct similarities between our Sundays. I think it would be best if we focused on work. We have a very busy day ahead of us if we hope to protect the jobs of everyone who works at Cortland Enterprises. Sebastian flopped back into his seat. His right hand rested on his heart. Ugh, that was cold. How could you be so mean to me first thing in the morning? Sadly, this was not the first time he'd ever said that to me. It was a refrain I'd heard frequently when I scheduled meetings for him prior to 9 a.m. My boss always came in at 8, so he could have a minimum of a full hour to go through messages and notes before his first meeting. I was usually in between 6 and 7 to prepare for my day, but he didn't need to know that. You promised me an answer today, he pressed, dropping his voice to a whisper. We're at work. We need to focus on work, I gritted out between clenched teeth. Sebastian's grin turned wicked as he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. My gaze followed his hand to the center of his desk, where he set the marble egg, the friend egg. That is not going to work. I didn't think anyone could overhear us, but there was no way I was taking any chances. If I were to agree to your bargain, we would need to set up some ground rules about what's not allowed in the office. The first thing would be that egg. Sebastian flashed me a wounded expression, complete with his bottom lip jutting out. You can't ban the friend egg. You have personal conversations with Kaylin. But they still fall within the bounds of good taste for work. I doubt that would happen with you. Wisely, Sebastian didn't debate that. You take private phone calls. Only in an emergency. Sebastian pressed his index finger to the narrow top of the egg and slightly rolled it on its wider base. His thumb stroked up the flawless side, making my horrible brain wander to places it shouldn't, like what would it be like to feel his massive hands running up and down my bare skin. On Sunday, the heat of those hands had burned through my clothes, and still I ached to strip so I could feel him skin to skin. No, work thoughts. This needs to be negotiable. Emergency and lunch. I narrowed my eyes at him, trying to think of any loopholes that he might try to create. Lunch included, but just if it's the two of us. Sebastian's grin returned in a flash. Does this mean you're saying yes? Did it? When I'd fallen asleep last night, I'd been leaning that way, but wobbled over to saying no while in my morning shower. It all returned to what he'd asked me in my apartment. What if he wasn't my boss and he'd hit on me in that bookstore? I knew my answer would be yes, even without knowing he was stupidly rich. The man was handsome, fun, and too sweet. Dating someone like him was a dream for anyone. Was I really too scared to take a chance? I dragged in a deep breath, all the muscles in my body tensing. Yes, I agree to the bargain that you laid out. Sebastian made a fist and appeared as though he were going to punch the air, but I stopped it with a word. However, crap, he muttered and dropped his hand to his lap. We need to set up some ground rules. Have dinner with me tonight. We can discuss them over dinner. I know the perfect restaurant. My lips twisted to stop my smile. Would you like me to book it for you, sir? Sebastian snorted and reached out, hooking his index finger through my left pinky as my hand hung limp at my side. Enough of your sass. You've never booked dates for me in the past, and you're not about to start now. I knew I should pull my hand free, but his warm touch was sending tingles up my arm. It was so tempting to just open my hand and thread the rest of our fingers together. A knock on Sebastian's door had me jerking my hand free of his. I stiffened and jumped a step away from him before I even looked up to find the CFO standing in the doorway. Sorry, I know I'm early, but it's going to take longer than the 30 minutes we've allotted for this meeting, Declan said as he walked in. Yeah, come on in. Sebastian waved him in as he sat up in his chair properly. Good morning, Mr. Foster. Can I get you some coffee or hot tea? I inquired, slipping easily into my role as Sebastian's assistant. No, thank you. Are you feeling better today? Declan asked. I stared at him for a moment, confused as to why he would ask that. Had Sebastian told him I'd left early on Friday because of illness? I was about to assume it was that, but I noticed out of the corner of my eye that Sebastian was making faces at him and motioning for him to be quiet. It hit me like a truck. Sebastian had said he'd returned to the office for some paperwork and had found me on Friday, but that wasn't the case. Declan had found me when he'd dropped those financial numbers off on his desk. The CFO had found me passed out drunk in the CEO's office. Holy fuck. Mr. Foster, I choked, my voice trembling as the horror of my reality sank in. I am so sorry that you found me like that. It was completely inexcusable. Sebastian grabbed my ice-cold fingers and squeezed them tight enough to hurt, trying to capture my attention, but I couldn't look away from Declan. Byron, don't. You don't owe him an apology. He's correct. You don't need to apologize. Sebastian explained you were dealing with a family issue and that you had his permission to work in his office after hours. Like Sebastian, I just want to be sure that you don't hurt yourself. You're very valuable to Cortland Enterprises. Thank you, Mr. Foster. I don't feel worthy of your kind words, but they are appreciated. I promise it will never happen again. Sebastian squeezed my hand, and I finally glanced at him. He was smiling, but there was worry still filling his honey-brown eyes. After my meeting with Declan, I'll come find you so we can finish the rundown of the day. Yes, sir. Sebastian's calm words about work put me on even footing and allowed me to escape with no further embarrassment. But I still didn't know if Friday's debacle was going to prove to be a disaster for my career or a stepping stone to the best decision of my life. Thankfully, I had a very busy day of work ahead of me. Chapter 8. Sebastian Cortland. Opal's, across the Ohio River in northern Kentucky, was one of my favorite restaurants to hit when I was leaving the office. I'd secured a reservation, without Byron's help, for a table on their patio, which provided an excellent view of downtown Cincinnati as the sun was setting. The food was also superb, and the vibe was classy but relaxed. The only problem was that there was a slight chance of someone recognizing us, so I had to behave and keep my hands to myself. Byron and I had gone out plenty of times for meals during work hours, and we could easily say this was yet another working late meal between colleagues. Not that I wanted to talk about work, nor could my thoughts about him be described as professional. Nice choice, Byron praised after the hostess left us with menus. This has been on my list of places to try since it opened. There was no stopping my grin at his words. I might have even wiggled in my seat a bit, but I didn't think he noticed, because his eyes were taking in the view. God, he was sexy. A few strands of his dark brown hair fell forward as he bent his head to peruse his menu. He tugged on his bottom lip with his teeth, and part of me wanted to steal that lip from him, really show him how to take care of it properly with my teeth and my tongue. As I watched him, his pale skin was turning a rosy shade, and he stopped playing with his lip. You're staring at me, he mumbled without looking directly at me. I can't help it. I can't do it in the office because you sit too far away. Byron snorted and lifted his eyes to my face. I suspect if my desk was next to yours, neither of us would get anything done during the day. I gasped, pressing one hand to my chest. Are you saying that I would be a distraction? An enormous one. You were the kid in school who couldn't stop talking and drove the teacher crazy. A laugh jumped past my lips. It was almost scary how well he could read me, but then that was part of his job and why he was so successful at it. Byron could anticipate my needs before I even realized what they were. The only thing I'd surprised him with was my attraction to him. How did your meeting go with Marcia? He inquired, referring to my final meeting of the day with the marketing director for our home goods division. As I opened my mouth to answer, Byron's face scrunched up, and he seemed to curse himself. Sorry, you don't want to talk about work now. This is supposed to be our time off. It's okay. Work is common ground for us, I said. There was no way I could fault him. My first 3 ideas for conversation starters had all been about work. I know you like to read nonfiction books about business. What about movies? What kind of movies are you into? Our server appeared a second later with a rundown of the specials. When she left, Byron offered a small smile and answered, I don't watch a lot of movies, but I am a fan of anything with a lot of action or drama. I'm not much into comedies because most of them I find stupid rather than funny. Sci-fi or fantasy? Both. Horror? His nose scrunched up slightly, and I wanted to run the tip of my finger along it. More thriller than horror? Not much for the gore and slasher movies, though I do like the old Michael Myers and Jason movies. What about you? I'm like you, I prefer action over drama, and I will happily watch sci-fi and fantasy so long as they are well written. The only time I'll watch a comedy is with my friends. Also, I love a good war documentary. Ancient history. Byron volunteered. I made a face that said I wasn't following. He huffed a laugh and continued. I like war documentaries too, but my favorite are the ones about ancient civilizations. I've seen dozens about ancient Egypt and the different dynasties of China. So, grabbing some takeout and pulling up the PBS app for a documentary would be considered a good date to you? I teased. Well, I don't know. The smile forming on his mouth looked so fucking kissable. He was lucky we were in public. As the second date with someone? Not unless I know them fairly well and would feel comfortable in their house. If it were someone I've been dating for a while, then yes, I think that would be an excellent date. The server returned to take our orders. Thankfully, I was familiar with their menu because I'd barely glanced at it since I sat down with Byron. Of course, he had all my attention. How could food be more important than his smirk or the laughter twinkling in his eyes? Impossible. Except my stomach was grumbling, and lunch had been far too long ago. I needed food. When Byron was finished, I picked something with red meat and handed over the menu, ready for the server to be gone so I could focus on my date. Sebastian? A shiver ran through me at the sound of my name on his tongue. After hearing an unsexy sir all day, my name falling from his lips was heaven. Your hand keeps inching closer to mine, Byron observed. My gaze darted across the table to where my right hand was resting, and he was correct. My fingers had inched closer to his while we talked about our movie preferences. It was just that his hand was sitting there, so tantalizing. It would take so little effort to slide my hand those last few inches to run the tips of my fingers down his, to thread our fingers together. I take it you like to hold hands, Byron said. I blinked at him. The spell he had me under was broken temporarily. Actually, no. He chortled. I don't believe you. Who could blame him? I'm serious. I've never been a fan of holding hands or even felt the desire to hold hands. Or rather, until you, I didn't. His brow furrowed. I hadn't even noticed the difference. He'd had to call attention to it, but it was the truth. I've never been one of those cuddly, touchy-feely guys. There's never been someone in my life that I wanted to curl up with, to hold their hand or keep my hand on their knee. In fact, I dated someone like that once, and we didn't get more than 2 dates before I ended it. Every time we were together, I felt like I had 0 personal space. He made you feel claustrophobic? He supplied. Yes! I threw my hands up in the air. When I brought them back down, the fingers on my right hand brushed his. But it's different with you. I want to touch you constantly. There's never enough. Byron gave his head a tiny shake. Don't you think it might be because it's forbidden to touch me during the day? Maybe that's your entire infatuation with me. It's got nothing to do with me, per se, but just that you want something you're not supposed to have. Yes and no. Yes, I think being around you all day, but not allowed to touch, makes me want to touch you more, but I'm not sure that's going to disappear even if I could touch you all the time. You look very huggable. Byron's entire body shook with suppressed laughter. I do not. Every guy I've dated has said I'm all hard angles, like a triangle. There's nothing huggable about me. I can't wait to prove them all wrong. Also, I don't think the forbidden is linked to my infatuation. The day you came to interview at Cortland, I spotted you sitting in Fountain Square, reading over some papers as I was returning from lunch. I thought you were adorable then, and I think you're adorable now. You can't help it, can you? He asked. What? Flirting. The word drifted from his lips, and Byron's fingers caressed mine. My entire body froze as I soaked in that phantom-light touch as it sent a spark along my arm and across my chest. Every word out of your mouth is flirty. Do you mind? Byron paused for a second, and I hung there like a worm speared on a hook, dangling above a fish as it debated whether to bite. A heartbeat later, his smile widened and his fingers threaded with mine. No, I don't. It's been far too long since someone flirted with me. Oh, yes. He was all mine. You don't have to walk me up to my apartment, Byron said, his voice full of laughter. I caught his hand as I joined him on the sidewalk after giving some instructions to my driver. Of course I do. I'm your date, and it's my responsibility to make sure that you arrive safely home. There's no way I'd be able to sleep at night if I didn't know for a fact that you'd made it inside your apartment unmolested. Byron grunted as he pulled open the door to his building. You mean unmolested by any strangers? By my date? That's an entirely different matter. I like to believe that is negotiable. We held hands on the way up to his floor, and I loved every second of it. I'd loved our entire date. The food had been great, the conversation even better. Ground rules for our dating had come up briefly, but for now, we settled on not acting inappropriately in the office and no kissing in public. That did not rule out kissing in private locations. As the night wore on, Byron relaxed more and more. At the office, he rarely made a witty quip or teasing remark, but when it was just the two of us after hours, he was full of snarky comments and jokes. There was only one thing that was going to make this evening perfect: a kiss goodnight. Byron knew what I wanted. I could tell by the smirk resting on his lips, but he was determined to make me beg and work for it. Just the idea of him teasing me like this had left me with a semi-hard cock pressing against the front of my underwear. His apartment was right off the second-floor landing, which made our walk far too short. His keys and briefcase clutched in his left hand, he snuck out his right for me to shake. Well, it has been a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for dinner. Instead of taking it, I placed my right hand on the door jamb next to his head and leaned in. Really? A handshake? When I know your kisses can scramble my brain? I think you should hurry to your car. It's been a long day for Carl, and I'm sure he'd like to get home to relax, Byron replied, still holding out his hand. I told Carl to drive around the block for the next 15 minutes. 15 minutes, huh? I didn't think negotiating a goodnight kiss with you would be a quick thing. I fully expected him to continue to argue with me, using up all of those 15 minutes, but he didn't. Byron hooked his right hand across the nape of my neck while he rose on the tips of his toes. He didn't kiss me. Those perfect lips grazed my cheek as he went in for my ear and whispered, 15 minutes should be more than enough time for you to show me how good of a cocksucker you are. My semi went to raging hard-on in the blink of an eye. For a moment, I wondered if he was teasing me, but as he drew back, the fire in his eyes told the story of a man desperate to have his cock in my mouth, and I was more than happy to oblige. Inside, now. Byron nodded and released me to swing around to his door. He fumbled with his keys, trying to get the right key into the hole. The keys hit the ground with a loud metallic clatter, and Byron swore. When he bent to pick them up, he presented me with too tempting of an opportunity to pass up. I grabbed his hips, lined his ass up with my groin, and pressed my dick right into the seam of his cheeks. There. I wanted my cock nestled right there in all that heat before I slid into his tight little hole. A soft whimper escaped him, and the keys hit the floor again. Byron remained bent over and wiggled his ass, fitting it even tighter against me. My hands tightened on his hips. In the apartment. Yes. Byron panted and pawed his way up the door. It took him 2 tries to get the damn thing open. The moment it stopped blocking our path, I moved with him, practically attached to his body. The door slammed shut. Byron's briefcase and keys hit the floor, and I shoved him back into the door as I seized his mouth in a goodnight kiss to end all kisses. God, he tasted and felt like heaven. How could it have been only yesterday since we'd last done this? If we continued in this fashion, I'd need to kiss him at least once an hour to survive. Teeth clacked together as we ate at each other's mouths. My hands were frantic, pulling at his clothes, searching for any bare patch of skin. Some part of my brain kept shouting, "Hurry, hurry," before he comes to his senses. Instead, Byron pulled on a lock of my hair as he tore his mouth away. "Be careful. Don't rip anything. I can't afford to replace any clothes you ruin." A grin spread on my tender lips, and my hand tightened on his tie while still being cautious not to wrinkle it. "I'll buy you a whole new wardrobe." Byron pulled my hair again. "No, I like my wardrobe. Be careful." Bossy Byron made me hard and stupid. All I could do was attack his mouth, wringing out more moans and needy noises. But my hands remained gentle as they pulled away his tie and unbuttoned his shirt. I dragged my mouth from his when I opened his collared shirt and pushed up his undershirt to reveal a pale chest with a light dusting of hair and lean, ropey muscles. Perfect skin, warm and soft under my lips like velvet. I kissed my way down, dropping to my knees as I licked across his stomach while my fingers fumbled with his belt. As soon as I got it unbuckled and his pants open, I shoved them aside to find he was wearing a pair of silky navy boxers with little white diamonds. His hard cock stretched out the front, pulling the waistband away from his stomach. There was even a small, damp spot from the leaking head. "Not what you were expecting?" I stared up at him, admiring his flushed face, swollen lips, and sweat-slicked temples. "I think I've imagined you in everything and nothing. Not one fantasy could hold a candle to the reality." Loosely wrapping my fingers around his cock, I stroked him through the fabric of his boxers. He keened, arching his entire body into my touch so that his head thudded on the door. "Is this your fantasy?" I asked as I pulled his boxers low enough for his dick to spring free. "Your boss on his knees getting ready to suck your dick." Byron lifted a hand, and trembling fingers grazed my cheek. "More than just my boss. The sexiest man I've ever seen is about to suck my cock. I'll be lucky to last more than a minute." That was fine with me. My dick was making demands, and I was in danger of coming in my pants like a fucking teenager if I didn't get this shit under control. A quickie for our first time would mean I got to torture him for hours on our second date. I stroked him slowly, loving the heat and silken weight of him in my hand. Fingers threaded through my messy hair and pulled slightly, creating tiny pinpricks of pain that urged me forward. With one last stroke, I took him in my mouth, but only the sensitive head. Holding him tight with my lips, I sucked him and played with his slit, using the tip of my tongue. "Sebastian!" Byron howled. The needy sound echoed through the room. His hips punched forward and his legs trembled. "Suck me. Suck my dick." With one last teasing lick, I took all of him. He cried out again in a mix of what sounded like relief and ecstasy. I almost gagged when he hit the back of my throat, but I recovered as I focused on creating that sweet, hot suction as I bobbed on his dick. It was like a dam had broken inside of him, letting loose a flood of swearing and filthy talk that nearly sent me over the edge. I would never have guessed my tightly wound little assistant had such a mouth on him, and I loved it because that side of him was all mine. He swelled on my tongue as he inched closer and closer to climax. My cock was leaking and throbbing in time with my racing heart. I opened my pants and shoved my hand in to wrap around the base of my dick, staving off my looming orgasm, Harder. God, Sebastian, I'm close. Tell me you're going to swallow. Please, swallow for me. Take it. Take it. Ah! He didn't get the chance to finish what he was saying. Byron came hard and fast down my throat. I barely tasted any of him before I was reflexively swallowing it. I licked every last drop from his cock and let him slide from my mouth. With a smirk, I tipped my head up to find the sexiest man leaning against the door with sweaty hair and a crooked grin, looking as if I'd just sucked all his brains out through the end of his dick. Hope you don't mind, I panted as I started to stroke myself off to the debauched sight of him. Byron licked his lips. Want me to return the favor? Too close. It's enough to have you watching. His smile grew a little more wicked. Then lower your pants more so I've got a better view of the show. Why argue? He'd already had so many other brilliant ideas. I released my dick and shoved my pants and briefs away as much as I could so he could have a clear view of my cock. Fuck, he groaned. That is a thick dick. I should have told you to fuck me instead. You were going to break my ass with that thing and I can't wait. I want to ride you until I can't move. As he spoke, his hand dropped to fondle his softening cock. I was on edge, but the images he was putting in my head as he stood over me with those hot, hungry eyes destroyed what restraint I had left. My orgasm ripped through me as if I were made of tissue paper. A shout tore from my throat and I covered his floor in splatters of cum. As soon as I finished, Byron dropped to his hands and knees and took my cock deep into his mouth. A moan of pleasure and pain tumbled from me as he sucked the last of my cum from me like my dick was a straw. My cock was so sensitive I wanted to stop him, but it was in Byron fucking Graham's mouth and I didn't ever want that to end. When he lifted his head a moment later, there was a smear of my cum on his bottom lip. I grabbed the back of his head and pulled him in close before licking it off and kissing the shit out of him. Chirp, ring, buzz. The little sounds broke through my bliss and Byron huffed a breathless laugh. That's your phone. Carl's probably checking up on you. Shit. I tried to find my phone in my rumpled state of undress and nearly fell. In the end, I had to stand, my knees aching and protesting as I pulled up my pants and located where my phone had fallen. There were 3 messages from Carl as he'd become more worried about me. Be down in 5, I texted him. Not that I wanted to leave, but sleeping over on the first date was a bit pushy. Plus, I didn't think we'd both fit on his futon. Mind if I use your bathroom? Go for it. You need it, he said as he pointed to the one other door in the apartment. Such sass, I teased, but he wasn't wrong. My hair was standing up in every direction, my face was flushed, and my clothes were wrinkled and askew. I splashed some water on my face, trying to dispel the worst of the fog. His bathroom was tiny, but everything was neat. Not an unnecessary thing cluttering up the space, and everything in its place. My head now clear, I ran my fingers through my hair and fixed my clothes. Byron had already changed from his suit to a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt when I joined him. I strolled to him and loosely wrapped my arms around his waist. I wasn't expecting that, I murmured as I nuzzled his neck. A low chuckle shook Byron as he cuddled me. What, that I like sex? He turned his face and pressed a soft kiss to the spot behind my ear and lowered his voice to a whisper. I love sex. Yeah, I could believe that. Byron loosened his hold on me so he could pull away enough and look me in the eye. But I'm smart enough not to confuse sexual compatibility with being in a relationship. We can be hot as hell in bed, but be horrible together. I can enjoy getting fucked, but not want to be romantically involved with the person. Agreed. We had proved tonight that we were sexually compatible, no question. But what about the other? Was this date good enough to earn me a second? He let out a near-silent laugh and grinned. You know it was. Let me recover from this one before you make plans. Deal. I stole one last lingering kiss, wanting to savor every moment I could of finally having this man in my arms. The memory of his laughter and his taste followed me all the way home. This was an excellent start. Chapter 9. Byron Graham. It was weird being in the office the next day. I should have been able to put our date and late-night activities to the back of my mind, but every place within the building made me think of Sebastian, and every thought of Sebastian led me right to that image of him on his knees with my cock in his mouth. Maybe dating was a bad idea. How was I supposed to work with him after kissing him? After watching him come all over my floor? Which was the hottest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I'd thought the man screamed sex appeal before. After seeing that, it was a wonder I didn't melt whenever I was near him. It took me a few tries to get through all the emails waiting for me, but the haze created by last night's orgasm finally faded. As I finished my initial barrage of emails, mostly to request agendas for meetings people wanted Sebastian to attend, Kaylin arrived, wearing what appeared to be the same suit he'd worn the previous day and deep shadows under his eyes. Not a good sign. I grabbed my mug and followed him into the break room, where he stared at the coffee maker as though he couldn't understand what it was. After putting my mug on the counter, I reached out and plucked his out of his hand to keep it from falling and shattering. "What can I do to help?" I asked as gently as possible. Kaylin sucked in a wet, ragged breath and forced his eyes to open wide. "What? Nothing. Everything's fine. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're wearing the exact clothes you wore yesterday and there are bags under your eyes. What happened? Did someone in your family pass away? Is Arden all right?" A sharp gasp cut through the room and every muscle in Kaylin's body locked up, bracing itself. "We had a fight." Okay, that was something better than death. Kaylin didn't look like he'd been through a physical confrontation, just looked emotionally hurt and like he'd gone without sleep. "Did Arden punch you or physically threaten you?" Kaylin stared at me as though I'd lost my mind. He shook his head and dropped into the plastic chair I'd maneuvered him to. "No, of course not. Arden would never." "Good. What happened?" "We got into this big argument last night. I was telling him about how the merger fell through and I'm worried about people losing their jobs. And he began on about how I'd be better off creating my own business and that I'm wasting my talent on being Sebastian's secretary. He called me a secretary." Mr. Arden was on the fast track to getting my foot lodged in his balls. Kaylin was not a secretary. I wasn't a fucking secretary. We'd gained skills working for Sebastian that Arden wished he had. "There are times when he can be so insufferable. Like, because he's his own boss and runs his own company, he's smarter than the rest of us." Kaylin raged. But the fire that blazed brightly one second went out in the next. His entire body slumped and he hung his head. At the end, we were both shouting and saying things we didn't mean. I stormed out and started driving. I was almost to Columbus when I realized if I didn't turn around, I'd be late for work. I pinched the bridge of my nose and held in my sigh. Columbus was 2 hours north of Cincinnati. It was a lucky thing he'd come to his senses prior to reaching Cleveland. "You need to go home and get some sleep," I stated, squeezing his shoulder. His head popped up in an instant. "I can't. Sebastian said it's all hands on deck for our recovery planning meetings. You're going to need help compiling the reports, and Kate in design asked for my input on some Japanese packaging she has to get over to legal for review. You need to sleep first. I can tell Sebastian you're taking a sick day." Before I could continue, the sound of footsteps stopped the words in my throat. That wasn't Sebastian's cadence, and no one bothered to come up to this floor this early without an appointment except for the CFO. Yet that didn't sound like Declan Foster either. "Kaylin?" It was a loud whisper, as if the person were trying to be quiet but still needed his voice to carry in the hidden nooks and crannies. "Arden?" Kaylin shot to his feet and was out of the break room faster than I could offer to talk to Arden for him. I followed right on his heels, prepared to stomp a mud hole in Arden's ass if he continued to hurt Kaylin. To his credit, Arden didn't look any better than Kaylin. His hair and clothes were a rumpled mess, and his eyes carried the same dark circles. He was also carrying a gigantic bouquet of white daisies and a bag of food from Kaylin's favorite breakfast restaurant. "Oh, thank God you're here," Arden exclaimed when he caught sight of Kaylin. "What are you doing here?" Kaylin stopped several feet away, his arms folded over his chest. "Looking for you so I could apologize for being a giant asshole. I went to your place last night, but you never came home. I tried calling you, but you turned off your phone. Honey, I've been worried sick about you." "Why? Afraid Sebastian's secretary can't take care of himself?" Kaylin shot back, and I winced. That was a solid hit. Arden hung his head and even dropped to his knees in front of Kaylin, making the man gasp as the paper bag of food crinkled and the flowers rustled against his jacket. "I'm sorry. I should never have said that. It was wrong and so fucking out of line. You were so much more than I implied. Besides, even if you were a secretary, there's nothing wrong with that. I have no right to criticize your life. The only thing that matters is your happiness, and I know working here makes you very happy." Damn, Arden was very good at apologizing. Unfortunately, I didn't get to stay and enjoy the show. As Arden finished speaking, the elevator doors opened, and Sebastian stepped off with his bodyguard Neil. Not good timing. Nothing killed a mood like your boss showing up. I slipped past the couple and briskly walked toward Sebastian, whose breezy smile turned into a confused frown as he stared past me. I held up one hand and made a spinning motion with my finger, indicating that he should turn around. "What's going on?" Sebastian whispered as I reached him at the bank of elevators. "I thought proposals were on one knee, not two." "That's not a proposal. It's an apology," I corrected as I gave both Sebastian and Neil a little shove into the elevator car. "We're going to the cafe at Fountain Square to give them a moment of privacy." Thankfully, I had my phone on me and could access my notes for the day. "What happened?" Sebastian asked as soon as the doors closed and we started to descend. "They had an argument, and Arden said some unwise things, such as calling Kaylin your secretary. Bullshit. I need to go up there and set him straight." Sebastian stepped forward and reached out to punch the button for the top floor, but I caught his hand, stopping him. "No." "What?" "No. Kaylin is more than capable of handling Arden without your help." Sebastian huffed and dropped back against the wall. How dare he not properly appreciate Kaylin? Does he not realize how critical that man is to our day-to-day operations? How many departments he's coordinating to make sure everything is running smoothly? Does he not know how hard it is to manage me? Arden has no idea how fucking lucky he is to have found Kaylin. I reluctantly released his hand and studiously ignored the butterflies in my stomach taking flight. But it wasn't working. Hearing him angrily defend Kaylin only made my heart race and dance in my chest. It wasn't that he was a good, thoughtful boss. He was a good, thoughtful person. He cared about those around him. How could I not want to swoon? "I don't think you have to worry," I said. Arden delivered a rather astute and heartfelt apology just as you arrived. It sounded like he'd realized that he was talking out of his ass last night and was properly begging for forgiveness. Good. Kaylin was happy with Arden. I don't want to see him hurt. Arguments are a normal part of a relationship. I think they'll be able to get past this bump in the road, I murmured as I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. True. Sebastian was silent for all of 2 floors before his shoulder bumped mine. How many relationships have you ended because of an argument? I slid him a repressive look, but it had no effect on him. While Neil was the only one in the elevator with us, and he likely heard stories from Carl, we still needed to act like professionals during work hours. Very few, sir, I said stiffly. I'd been in very few relationships, and most of those had ended because I was cheap and boring. I wouldn't be surprised if Sebastian came to the same conclusion. We were leaving the office and crossing Fountain Square when Kaylin called me. You can return now. Arden and I patched things up, he announced as soon as I answered. You're happy with his apology? He was sincere? Yes. We both overreacted, but we talked it out and we're good now. Arden is leaving. I want you to go home as well, I ordered. Sebastian stopped beside me in front of the tall, bronze Tyler Davidson fountain and lifted one questioning eyebrow. I nodded to him and gave a thumbs up. No, I'm fine. There's work. There will always be work. You're exhausted and won't be able to concentrate. Go home, get some sleep, and take a shower. Be back by 1 to help me with the summary reports for the board of directors." There was a moment of silence before Kaylin more hesitantly asked, "Are you sure?" "Very sure." Sebastian is nodding in agreement as well. "We're going to grab some coffee and then be up. I'll see you at 1. Sebastian was chuckling at me when I ended the call. I narrowed my eyes at him and stated in my sternest voice, "He needs sleep. He and Arden are fine now, but Kaylin needs sleep, or he'll be useless all day." My boss straightened and gave me a sharp salute. "Yes, sir." I ignored his nonsense and stepped inside the coffee shop, thanking Neil as he held the door open for us. As Sebastian followed, I grabbed his arm and gave him a small pull to the left. The lunatic had his eyes locked on me instead of watching where he was going. One more step and his shoulder would have slammed into the doorframe. He didn't even blink in reaction. I doubted he'd even noticed. Sebastian leaned in close as we stood in line. "I love how you take such good care of the Cortland Enterprises employees. It's incredibly sexy." I kept my eyes on my phone, praying he couldn't tell that my ears were burning and that my embarrassment was threatening to stain my cheeks. We spent a somewhat lazy hour in the cafe, sipping coffee and nibbling breakfast sandwiches as we discussed his schedule. Sebastian might have sat closer than necessary so he could look at my phone, and his thigh might have been pressed to mine, but it was purely innocent. There was no way he was doing it to torment me with his heat and gentle whiffs of his intoxicating cologne. Regardless, I was grateful when we returned to the office and separated so I could catch my breath and clear my head in time for Justine Overland's arrival. Of the various executives at Cortland Enterprises, she was one of my favorites. Justine was the company's chief innovation officer, and she worked on creating new products for the company's different divisions. "There's the hardest working man at Cortland," she greeted me like she always did. "Just trying to keep up with the hardest working woman," I replied with a smile. Everything about her screamed free spirit, from her colorful clothes to her eclectic orange-rimmed glasses to her jangly jewelry. It was barely 9 in the morning, but her hair was already twisted into a messy bun as if she'd been in the office for 5 or 6 hours, and knowing her, it was entirely possible. "Is he ready for me?" she whispered. 2 minutes. We had our morning meeting in a coffee shop and returned only a short time ago. "Got it." She rocked back and forth on her heels, trying for nonchalant, but I wasn't fooled. They all tried to get gossip out of me because they knew I was privy to the best dirt. "So, I heard the merger was squashed officially," she began, and then added in a low voice, "Rat bastards. Mr. Cortland is planning to make an announcement to the entire company later this week after the new plan for 2025 is nailed down." Good. I know a lot of people are worried." Another long pause. "Were you there?" she inquired haltingly. "Yes, I handed out the due diligence report." Justine squealed and jumped to my desk, her bracelets clacking together. She rested her elbows on the corner of my desk and put her chin in her hands. "Tell me, was it glorious? Did they lose their minds? Was the CEO really shouting for Sebastian to be arrested?" I tried to hold in my smile as I gave her the tiniest nod possible. Justine's laugh would have put to shame a Disney villain in its evilness. "I knew we should have sneaked in one of those micro cameras on you. I would have paid half a year's salary to see that debacle unfold." "Ridiculous," I muttered, even as my smile sneaked out. Justine was too fun. "I take it that this is the beginning of the go big or go home push," she stated as she straightened and tilted her head toward Sebastian's office. "We need one big bestseller to carry us through the year. Do you mind if I ask, is that a normal operating procedure for companies of our size?" She nodded immediately. "Some stodgy conservative firms who can't bang out new ideas will begin with cutting costs, layoffs, and hiring freezes, but Cortland is nimble despite its size, and we have a long history of exciting new products and innovations. It's our bread and butter." "But isn't it risky to have everything riding on a single product launch?" Justine shrugged, sending her earrings swinging. "It is, to a degree, but in Cortland's history, we've had only 2 products bomb, and since then, we've implemented more focus groups, reviews, and quality controls. The more likely thing is for a product to do well, but not be the bestseller we hoped." "Sorry, I don't mean to pry." She immediately waved off my apology. "It's not prying. These are excellent questions. Sharing knowledge makes the whole team stronger." Someone clearing their throat jerked our attention to Sebastian's office. The boss was standing in the doorway with an amused look on his face. "If you're done flirting with my assistant, I'm ready to start our meeting," he drawled. Justine snorted and strolled into his office. "You should count yourself lucky I've never tried to steal that brilliant man from you." Sebastian paused to stare at me before closing his doors. "Never," he growled. My heart fluttered at that growl, but a little knot tightened in my stomach. That was the grand plan, right? He'd win me over, thanks to this dating bargain, and I'd get moved to another department so we could date without me losing my job. I shoved the thought aside. Sebastian was being silly. My brain returned to what Justine had told me about new products and the nugget of an idea that was forming in my mind. It could be something that could be big, but I needed more research and numbers to help me. Chapter 10. Sebastian Cortland. "You're fucking him, aren't you?" Declan had to ask that just as I was taking a drink of whiskey. The amber liquid burned the back of my throat and sinus cavity as I choked. I put down the glass with a loud thunk and picked up my water as I wheezed and coughed. Tears clogged my eyes, and I was pretty sure I'd lost nose hair. "What the hell?" I rasped at Declan as he sat opposite me in the restaurant, looking unperturbed by his blatant attempt to kill me. "I'm just saying that you're being more obvious than usual if I've caught on that things have changed between you," Declan continued. "Having been my friend since high school, you would have thought he could show at least a modicum of concern for my well-being, but that wasn't his style. The icy blonde giant frowned at me like a snowman missing his top hat. After clearing my throat for a second time and taking a cleansing sip of water, I reclined in my chair. "Fucking? No." My voice still sounded like a 70-year-old pack-a-day smoker, but it was improving. Declan's frown deepened, and he continued to stare wordlessly at me. Fine, semantics. We haven't had sex yet, but I like to think that we will soon. We have started dating. It's been about a week now, and we've been out on 2 so far. This Friday, he's agreed to come to my house. I'm cooking dinner for day number 3. Our second date had been on Saturday when I'd taken him to see a movie. I remembered very little of the movie now, but that was because I'd spent most of those 2 hours in the dark trying to sneak my hand into his lap or under his shirt. My friend's expression did not brighten. If anything, it grew cloudier. He shifted forward in his seat, resting his forearms on the table. "Did you warn him that you can't cook? Or is your chef preparing the meal ahead of his arrival?" I waved a hand at him. No, she's not involved in this. I want to make it for him, even hoping to give Wilkins the night off, if he'll let me. Just the 2 of us in the house. No interruptions and no one to make him feel uncomfortable. Declan glanced around the restaurant as if to make sure that no one was listening before he continued. Not that anyone was paying us the slightest bit of attention. The Avenue was an old-school steakhouse in the heart of downtown that was a callback to London's gentlemen's social clubs, with lots of old leather, dark wood, dull brass, and a hint of cigar smoke for ambiance. Everything on the menu was slabs of meat and roasted vegetables served with a side of whiskey. While the place might take its decor from old men's clubs, there were still plenty of women filling the tables, chatting over pints of Guinness and eating thick cuts of pork chops bigger than their fists. Maybe you should consider why he's feeling uncomfortable. He could lose his job if someone discovers he's screwing his boss. Or have you both forgotten about that company rule? Now it was my turn to frown, but I directed it at my forsaken whiskey rather than my friend. We haven't forgotten. It's why we're being careful. I doubt you're being careful enough. You're going to find yourself at the end of a lawsuit. I sat up. Byron wouldn't sue me or the company. He's not like that, and you know it. Declan paused, and several seconds ticked by before he nodded once. You're right. I don't think he would sue you. He doesn't seem the type. But if the news got out, his reputation would be ruined. Practically nothing would happen to you. How is that fair? Do you care so little for him that you don't worry about his future and well-being? God, Deck, I'm not that much of a rad bastard, am I? Of course I'm worried about him. And if this came out and he lost his job, I would be devastated for him. He'd probably also leave me, which is the last thing in the world I want. I have a plan. Where's your faith? Our server swept over and snatched up our empty plates while inquiring whether we would like to see a dessert menu. Declan briskly ordered an espresso and I asked for a coffee. The caffeine wouldn't do much to make Declan livelier, and I probably didn't need the caffeine after the scare my friend had given me. However, the meal didn't seem complete without it. When we were alone, I released a sigh. I don't want anything horrible to happen to Byron. He means a lot to me. Not just as an exceptional employee, but as a person I want to get to know better. You mean in bed? I mean in all the parts of life. Yes, I want to screw his brains out, but I also want to hang out with him. I want to pamper the shit out of him. I leaned forward, pinned him with a hard stare. Haven't you ever met someone you've wanted to spoil rotten? You want to hand the world to them on a silver platter, to give them anything their heart could desire, to make anything possible. No. I flopped back in my chair with a huff. To tell the truth, neither had I. At least, I hadn't until I'd met Byron. There had been someone when I started college that I dated who'd used me for my money, but that had been different. Thomas had constantly asked for things or taken for granted that I would just pay for everything. What was worse was that I hadn't even seen it happening until it was too late. But even with all that, there'd been no grand urge to spoil him. When I was with Byron, I wanted to spoil him, to give him things that would make him light up. Yet he didn't seem like a things person. He struck me as more of an experiences kind of person. Byron was the one who would want to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower at sunset to see the golden glow settling over the magical city. He'd want to wander through all the winding streets of Florence, marveling at the ancient city and seeing every piece of Renaissance art. He'd want to cuddle every panda we could find in Chengdu, and I wanted to make each of those things happen for him. Well, I have. It's just unfortunate that the guy I want to date and get to know works for me. What's your plan? We're going on 10 dates. That's 10 chances for us to get to know each other and figure out if we want to be in a relationship. At the end of those 10 dates, if we want to be together, I will move him to a new department so that he's not directly under me at work. Declan cut in. I smirked at my friend's lame attempt at a joke. Yes, at work. At home, I'd keep Byron's sexy ass under me all night long. Right now, my first choice is to make him your assistant. As I expected, that got Declan's eyes to light up. He desperately needed a new assistant. He kept scaring off all his assistants, something about him being gruff, cold, and scary, which made it an uncomfortable work environment. Why can't I have him now? No, but he'll be safer if we move him now. Something like panic twisted in my stomach, and I grabbed my whiskey despite the earlier debacle with it. It's too early. Okay, fine, Declan said, even though it didn't sound like he'd accepted my plan. You date and things don't work out. Will you still be able to maintain a working relationship? Of course. Declan seemed even less convinced. You've been infatuated with him for 3 years. You're going to actually be fine if he doesn't want to date? I know it'll hurt, but I believe he will examine this fairly. Besides, I don't think it's going to happen. We're extremely compatible. We know each other and we're comfortable together. This is about taking the next step in our relationship. My friend sighed. I don't want to see either of you hurt. Please, be careful. Try to tone down the flirting in the office. Fine, I'll be careful. I hadn't thought I was being flirty, but Declan was probably right. He wasn't the type of person to notice these things, but if he had, it was likely that I was being more over the top than usual. And I didn't want Byron to be hurt by any of this. Have you heard from Simon recently? Declan inquired, and I was grateful for the change of subject. I didn't want to contemplate a world in which Byron didn't want to date me, where we couldn't make a relationship work. He's apartment hunting still, I replied. The server returned with our espresso and coffee, and I asked for the check. This lunch had stretched long enough, and it was time to get back to work. I offered to let him stay at my house if he wanted. That would give him time to get to know the area and figure out where he wanted to live, but he said no. Wants to do this on his own. I think you need to talk to Pierce, Declan stated as he picked up the small cup with the dark liquid. Why? He's being an ass. I snorted as I lifted my cup to my lips. Pierce is always an ass. It's what he does best. He's worse than usual, and it started when Simon began contacting you about moving to Cincinnati. What does he have against Simon? Closing my eyes, I savored the heat and rich flavor of my coffee, using the moment to mellow old, painful memories. It's not about Simon. It's about Sawyer. I opened my eyes and offered Declan a half smile. Out of all of us, Pierce was closest to Sawyer. I don't know if it was more than friendship, and that's not a landmine I'm stupid enough to step on out of curiosity. Pierce hasn't recovered from Sawyer's death, and I'm sure Sawyer's brother moving here is threatening to dredge up all those old feelings. What should we do? I shrugged. It had been 13 years since Sawyer's death. I could only guess that Pierce had been closer to Sawyer than we all understood, and that was why it was a continued sore spot for him. As far as I knew, they'd only been friends. They hadn't dated, hadn't even grown up together. They'd met at college like the rest of us. The one exception was Declan and me. I'll try talking to him next time I see him. But I hated that I didn't have high hopes for that effort. In the time I'd known him, Pierce had always been the one most reluctant to open up about things that were troubling him, and anything to do with Sawyer had a giant red flag on it. Pierce was a good guy at heart, and definitely cared about his friends. But he was also about as cuddly as a porcupine fucking a cactus. The man was all snark and bite, no fluff. Sadly, Sawyer's accident hadn't made him that way. According to his parents, Pierce was born grumpy and had never grown out of it. You could always see if Rome will do it. I immediately shook my head. Rome had zero delicacy, no finesse. He was all sledgehammer. Nope. Last time I tried that, Rome ended up with a black eye and took a baseball bat to Pierce's new Porsche. They refused to speak for almost 6 months. It's better if I try. While Pierce might be a grumpy asshole, I still believed that Simon moving to Cincinnati was a good thing. Sawyer would have wanted us looking out for his little brother, and this might also be a chance for Pierce to get past old wounds. Chapter 11. Byron Graham. Sebastian's house was overwhelming. Yes, I'd been there before, but I had zero memory of entering the house, and leaving the next day had been about getting out of there as quickly as possible with as much pride as I could scrape together. There had been no grand tour or time to gawk at the beauty. Wilkins was at the front door to welcome me as I exited my crappy car and walked up the wide main staircase, even though I felt like I should come in via the back or side entrance reserved for servants and deliveries. Regardless of my insecurities, Wilkins never gave a hint that I was less than worthy of being in such a beautiful home. Everywhere I looked, the place was all clean lines and calming colors. It was rather Spartan in its decorations, but that only seemed to lend to the overall elegance. The main foyer was perfect for greeting rich people coming for magnificent parties, where guests wore tuxedos and extravagant gowns as they dripped diamonds and sapphires. Wilkins led me to a room with huge 2-story windows that faced a lawn dotted with expertly manicured trees and shrubs, ending in what appeared to be a vast lake. Really, this house felt as if it should be owned by Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. Just on the edge of the room, Wilkins paused, his brow furrowing. "What's wrong?" "Sorry, Mr. Graham. Master Sebastian asked me to bring you here and see if you'd enjoy a beverage prior to dinner. However..." My brain was kind enough to supply 100 different problems that could have arisen in the past hour since I'd last texted him. Most of them involved work and were threatening to cancel our dinner. A work problem? "No, sir, it's dinner." That sounded ominous. "What's wrong with dinner?" I asked when Wilkins seemed reluctant to continue. The old butler's frown deepened, drawing even more wrinkles across his face. His voice dipped to a whisper, as if he were afraid of Sebastian overhearing him. "It's just that the master wanted to cook dinner himself as a surprise for you, but I don't believe he's attempted to cook anything in at least 10 years. I don't think things are going well in the kitchen. He's already sent the cook away for a night out, and he's banned me from meddling directly. Ah. That's problems when this one was at least cute, and one that I thought I could solve with minimal fuss. He's also said that I have the rest of the night off after I get you settled. I think he is determined to have the house to himself. I could imagine the dirty things that were running through that deviant's mind. Got it. Why don't you point me toward the kitchen and you make a hasty retreat? I suggested. I'd either be able to help Sebastian cook or we'd end up ordering a pizza. Both options were fine with me. Are you sure, Mr. Graham? Definitely. I'm quite experienced at getting Sebastian out of trouble. This will be nothing new. Except this was a lot more trouble than I had been expecting. At least the kitchen wasn't on fire when I arrived, just filled with smoke. Oh, wow. Might have slipped out as I stepped into the kitchen. It was a glorious thing of broad marble countertops, white cabinets, and shining appliances, but I barely noticed it as smoke clogged the air, something bubbled over in a large pot, and there was something black in a pan on the counter. "Hey, what are you doing in here?" Sebastian cried out, hoping to save you from a visit from the fire department. Sebastian's wide shoulders slumped, and he hung his head. This is harder than I'd thought it would be. I can see that. I swooped in and started turning off burners as I attempted to assess what he'd been trying to make. It looked like spaghetti, but the meatballs in the frying pan were tiny black balls, and the pot he'd selected for the spaghetti made it appear as if he were planning to feed an entire army. There was an empty box of noodles next to the stove. Sebastian groaned and leaned against the center island, glaring at the stove as if it were to blame for his cooking fail. I don't understand how this went so wrong. Did you follow the instructions? I tried, but things were getting done slower or faster than they were supposed to, so I had to tweak the temperature on the other things to get them to speed up. And then there was all this smoke, and the meatballs turned black on the outside but were raw on the inside. There was something adorable about this so-called titan of industry standing in the kitchen in his black apron, hair askew and a lost expression on his face. Sebastian walked into every situation with this unshakable air of confidence and control, but right now, this man was shook, and I couldn't take it. He glanced at me, and a crooked smile formed. I guess I'm not selling myself too well right now as someone who can take care of you. No, dearest, you are not a cook. I crossed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around his waist. But thankfully, you are very good at taking care of people in other ways. Sebastian's face lit up. My heart skipped and my fingers twisted in his shirt. You called me dearest, he whispered. Oh shit, I had. The word had slipped out. My cheeks burned and I ducked my head. Sorry, I didn't mean, no, you can't take it back. I love it. His arms closed, pulling me. He dipped his head, brushing a little kiss to my temple, then cheek, working his way to my lips. When our mouths met, it was in a series of small kisses, as if he were taking tiny sips, savoring the taste of me. As his tongue slipped inside, I pulled away with a smirk. If we went down this route, he'd just end up fucking me on the counter amidst the burned food. We needed to at least have the pretense of a proper date. So, how about we see what we can salvage of this dinner? I announced, turning to the stove. The answer to my question was none of it. Sebastian stood next to me with his hands on his hips. I should have let Carol cook. She warned me I was in over my head, but I wanted to impress you. At least I was smart enough to let her make dessert. You do amazing things every day that impress me at work. Why would you think spaghetti would impress me? Sebastian looked at me for a second in wonder, and then his eyes closed and all his features scrunched up as if he'd thought about his master plan and said, duh. I patted him on the stomach. It's a good thing you're cute. Hey! But even that came out with a laugh. Show me to your pantry. Let's see if you used all your cooked spaghetti. At least he'd known to boil the noodles in water and hadn't just started by throwing them into the sauce. Sebastian pointed to a door on the other side of the kitchen with a fancy frosted window. It was a surprisingly large closet with floor-to-ceiling shelves, and not those basic wire shelves, but wood ones. There was so much food, and in packages I'd never seen. Was Sebastian having specialty foods flown in from overseas? I wanted to examine everything, but being in there was making my stomach growl. Ha! Perfect! I snatched up a box of spaghetti and a jar of sauce. Those items appeared out of place among all the other fancy wrappers and glass jars, as if she'd gotten them for Sebastian's master plan. On my way out of the pantry, I spotted a loaf of Italian bread that probably had been delivered from the bakery that day. I snagged that as well, along with some olive oil. The point of having you over was not to have you cook for me. Sebastian continued to mope. I'm not cooking for you. We're cooking together. You get to throw out all the stuff you've made. I'm going to raid your fridge to see what you have in the way of fixings for salad. Once Sebastian cleaned away his first attempt, we got to work. Sebastian followed each of my instructions and asked dozens of questions about why I was doing what I was doing, as if he wanted to learn. The man was going to return to meals professionally cooked by a chef tomorrow. Why would he need to know any of this? But that was Sebastian in a nutshell. He wanted to understand anything he saw. Does this mean you grew up having a cook working for your family? I asked as I prepared the garlic butter that would go on the bread before I toasted it in the oven. Actually, no, not at all. Sebastian paused in his tearing of the lettuce to gaze at me. When I was a kid, my family existed right there on the edge of middle class. My parents took turns cooking our family meals. My family wouldn't be considered rich until I was a senior in high school. Even then, my parents were reluctant to hire a cook. They enjoyed making meals for our little family. Plus, I always had a friend or two over to bum a meal. It was only later, after my sister and I moved out, that they hired a cook to come in and prepare meals 4 days out of the week. Why didn't you learn to cook while you were in college? Sebastian's smile turned crooked, and he shrugged one shoulder. My first year in college, I was on the meal plan, so I was eating out of the cafeteria or takeout every day. From my second year on to graduation, I was living in a house with 4 other friends. Rome's parents were paying for the house, and Pierce's family paid for food, as well as the live-in chef and housekeeper. I stumbled to him, cackling. Oh my God, can you get more spoiled? It might sound nice, but they were fucking spies. Every time any of us did something even a little questionable or brought anyone back to the house for some fun, a parent was calling or showing up on our doorstep the next damn day. We couldn't get away with anything. I was laughing so hard I was wheezing. My eyes watered, blurring my vision. You're killing me. How did you learn to cook? Did one of your parents teach you? My laughter died in my throat, and I coughed to clear it again. No, not really. I picked up a few things watching my dad when I was young, but most of it I learned from videos or trial and error. Ate a lot of burned meals for a while. I glanced over at him out of the corner of my eye as I smeared the butter on the bread, and it looked like he wanted to ask more, but nothing came out and I could breathe easier even as guilt knotted in my stomach. He was so free with the information about his past and his family. Everything about my life after Ronnie's accident was a mess, and I wasn't ready to talk about it. It would only destroy the cozy atmosphere. Was it wrong that I wanted to use this time together to escape my life? To pretend that I wasn't one disaster away from shattering into a million pieces? These nights with Sebastian were like stepping into a dream, and I wanted to protect this bubble of happiness for as long as I could. Conversation remained relaxed and easy as I finished up the spaghetti. Sadly, he was out of defrosted meat for meatballs, but the bread and salad helped to make the meal filling enough. We continued our conversation as we ate at a small round table in a sunny breakfast nook off the kitchen. Sebastian dug out a bottle of red wine that was the best I'd ever tasted. It might have been a simple meal I'd cooked 1,000 times, but everything about it seemed better because of the company smiling at me from across the table. Not to mention the strawberry cake that Sebastian's chef had made for dessert was positively divine. Thankfully, Sebastian did know how to load a dishwasher. I'd tried to help him clean up when we were done, but he'd ordered me to sit on the stool at the island and sip my wine as he worked. And we will not be telling Carol how badly I fucked up dinner. Sebastian announced as he dried off his hands on a dish towel. "Your secret is safe with me," I said, tipping my nearly empty glass at him. "What would you like to do now? A movie?" "Actually, I would love a tour of your home if you don't mind." I stood and patted my belly full of delicious carbs. It would give me a chance to walk off dinner and dessert. "I would love to." Sebastian hurried around the island and took my hand, threading our fingers together as he led me through his enormous house. Sebastian had us backtrack to the foyer so I could see the front parlor, the formal parlor, the lounge, the billiards room complete with 2 pool tables, the formal dining room, his home office, and then the most glorious room, the library. And yes, the gorgeous beauty had a rolling ladder. I had to use every scrap of willpower to keep from pulling a bell and riding that thing down the wall. But beyond the ladder, I loved that his library wasn't about fancy leather-bound collectibles that couldn't ever be touched, let alone read. Sebastian's shelves contained classics and genre fiction, well-worn and loved paperbacks nestled in with hardbacks. This was a library that was more than a showpiece. It was a place that Sebastian frequently used. In truth, I really didn't want to move on from the library, but there was still so much of the house to see. We ventured to the lower level, where he had a home theater with 3 descending rows of plush reclining leather seats and 1 big leather couch in the center of it all. The air had a hint of popcorn, as if he and some friends had used the room not long ago. This had all the beauty of going to the theater, but with the bonus of privacy and the ability to pause the movie for bathroom breaks. "Hey, why didn't we use your theater for our second date?" I demanded as he led me out of the room. One corner of Sebastian's mouth tipped higher. "I wanted to make sure you felt safe with me, and a public place is more likely to do that than my secret theater room in the basement of my home. And going out to a movie theater makes it feel like a more traditional, real date." Sebastian's thoughtfulness made my heart speed up. I didn't mind falling for this amazing man, but why did I have to fall so damn fast? He jerked his head toward the theater room. "Do you want to watch a movie?" I quickly shook my head. "No, I want to see the rest of your house." Besides, I had other plans for this sexy man. With a tiny smirk, he continued on our tour, showing me the indoor pool, which led to the outdoor pool and flower gardens. We paused outside as the sky turned dark and the lights around the garden popped on. There was a heavy silence in the area. Not a single siren or car horn to be heard, just the croak of frogs and crickets beginning their nightly chorus. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't been able to experience in a while. But I knew we hadn't seen everything. In fact, there was an entire second floor he'd not shown off yet. That was where the guest room I had slept in was, and it was definitely where his bedroom was. Had he avoided it to not put any pressure on me? So sweet, so chivalrous, so silly. "Are there any other rooms we haven't seen yet?" I inquired, giving his hand a squeeze. A grin toyed with those perfect lips as he stared at me. "Well, there are a couple of rooms you haven't seen. Do you want to check them out?" I turned toward him, sliding my hand up his chest to rest over his heart. "I would love to see them. And in case you think I'm being too subtle, I want to know where you sleep." Sebastian caught my hand and lifted it to his lips, where he pressed a kiss to my palm. "I think I can arrange that." The pace became faster as we entered the house and headed upstairs. Within a minute, Sebastian was pushing open the double doors that led into a vast room with immense windows that faced the rear lawn and pool. Everything was decorated in shades of blue and gray, giving the room a cool feel. It took me a moment to locate the bed, but once I did, I couldn't turn away. This was where Sebastian slept against soft, silken sheets. Did he sleep naked? In briefs? Did he actually own pajamas? What did he look like when he was sleeping? These questions and so many more were buzzing through my brain. I needed to know the answers. I wasn't sure what tore my eyes away from that bed, but I finally found Sebastian standing several feet away. Everything about him had become a single taut muscle, clenched and frozen. A look of hunger was etched into his face, giving him a harsh edge that made my mouth dry and my skin tingle. I could feel his desire hammering me in hot waves, but he didn't move. In the 3 years I'd known the man, Sebastian Cortland had done a million little things to wear down my resistance. And over the course of a week, he'd doubled that number. Yet this shimmering second right here was when I knew I didn't stand a chance. I was going to fall in love with him. He was waiting for me to make the first move. No pressure, no teasing, no cajoling or enticing. I could choose to turn around and walk out of this room, and he wouldn't try to stop me. I knew it like I knew the world was round. He wouldn't hold it against me. We'd move on as though this moment had never happened. How could I not fall for someone who respected and valued me so much? I took a step toward him, and then another. He didn't move. He might have even stopped breathing. It was only as I reached up to cup his face with my hands that his frozen state finally shattered. His arms closed on me like a pair of steel bands and pulled me as his mouth descended onto mine in a blistering kiss. I melted into him, every inch of my body pressing into his, setting me on fire. The kiss went on and on, our tongues sliding along one another as he explored my mouth as if he were trying to taste every bit of me. My left fingers threaded through the silky soft hair at the back of his head, while my right hand slipped down his chest where his heart thundered. I plucked at the buttons on his shirt, fumbling with them as I fought to get to bare skin. One of the hands pressed to my spine dropped to grab one ass cheek. Sebastian squeezed and kneaded that mound of flesh, and I moaned into his mouth. He lifted me almost off my toes, rubbing my aching cock with his through our clothes. "Dearest," I panted, breaking off the kiss. "Your clothes are beautiful, but right now I need them fucking gone." "I love when you get bossy," Sebastian growled. "You gonna tell me how to fuck you too? How fast, how hard, how deep?" With each question, he thrust his hips, scrambling what was left of my brain. How was I going to be bossy? I couldn't even form words. For Sebastian, I'd try. After stealing one last searing kiss, I pushed out of his arms. I backpedaled while tugging at my shirt, pulling it from where it was tucked into my pants. "Strip," I barked. A cocky grin spread across his lips. "I don't know if I can do it without music." I threw my head back and laughed. Sadly, I'd been toeing out of my shoes at the time and almost fell. As I regained my balance and glanced at him, Sebastian had lost his shirt, revealing a broad chest with a nice fur of blonde hair I instantly itched to touch. He was gorgeous. My gaze followed his hands to his belt, and my heart picked up. I'd seen the equipment he kept hidden there, gotten a taste of it, but this time would be so much more. Except he stopped moving. My eyes snapped to his face to find him smirking at me with one eyebrow raised. "If you're just going to watch, I'm definitely going to need music." Watch? Oh shit, I was supposed to be undressing too. I attacked my clothes with renewed vigor and purpose. Shirt, pants, boxers, socks, all of it went flying to the sounds of Sebastian's chuckles. But all that stopped when I marched to him and our bare bodies collided in a rush of heat. A hiss escaped me as we touched for the first time. It was like being scalded, and I wanted more. Sebastian's massive hands wandered my body, caressing and massaging any bit he could reach, while steadily inching me back. It was only as the mattress hit my legs that I even noticed we'd been moving across the room. With a grin, Sebastian bent, grabbed me behind the knees and lifted, dumping me onto the bed. I laughed and stretched out my hands toward him, wanting to pull him on top of me. "Is sex with you always like this?" Sebastian pressed one knee into the mattress and paused, his smile softening. "No, I've never laughed like this with someone in bed. Not until you." Everything he said and did was a shot straight at my heart. I had no defense against him. "How the hell are you still single?" "I'm hoping that I won't be for much longer. There's this sexy guy that I've got my eye on, and..." "Enough," I laughed, waving my hands at him. "You've already got me naked and in your bed. Do something about it." Sebastian caught my hands and pinned them to the blankets above my head as he leaned close to steal a deep kiss. I raised my legs and wrapped them around his waist, pulling him in even closer. All the laughter fell away, and the heat rushed in. His chest hair scraped deliciously across my skin and teased my nipples. Sebastian slid his mouth from mine to skim along my jaw and down my neck. "I need to worship all of you," he mumbled against my skin. What he meant was that he intended to lick, suck, nibble, and kiss every inch of my body. My job was to lie there and wallow in the onslaught of his very thorough affection that left my cock aching and my ass empty. It was only when I was begging for relief that he finally stopped long enough to fetch a condom and lube. I moved to the center of the bed and flopped onto a massive pile of pillows. Sebastian crawled across the mattress to me, his hard muscles undulating under golden skin. He was a powerful god, and I was his very willing sacrificial offering just begging to be devoured. "How do you prefer it?" Sebastian inquired, pressing his sweet lips to my collarbone. "Usually on my knees from behind, but not tonight." Something about Sebastian made me feel daring. Sebastian lifted his head a little, waiting for me to continue. "I want to face you like this, so I can see your expression as you're coming." That devilish man licked his lips, the fire burning brighter in his eyes. "Guess I better do a good job of prepping you." Unfortunately, I was not prepared for Sebastian's brand of prepping. He tongued my ass and then sucked my cock while working his fingers inside of me. I was balanced on the very edge of orgasm for what felt like an eternity. Just as I was sure I'd crack, Sebastian would pull me back again. My legs trembled and my entire body was slick with sweat. When Sebastian finally stopped to slip on the condom, a relieved sob nearly broke from my throat. His feverish gaze roasted me as the fat head of his cock brushed against my hole. He pushed in slowly, and my body stiffened at the intrusion. No matter how well he'd prepared me, he was still large, and it had been a while since I'd last been penetrated. "Should I stop?" Sebastian demanded after he'd already stopped. His voice was low and rough, as though he'd been gargling gravel. Muscles strained and twitched as he fought to remain perfectly still. "No, don't stop. Just go slow." Sebastian's grin was tight as he put one hand under my left knee and pressed my leg up toward my chest. At the same time, he continued to push forward, filling me with his phenomenal thickness. My eyes rolled into my head, and I moaned loud enough to be heard by all of Sebastian's very distant neighbors. "Fuck, baby," Sebastian swore. My eyes flicked open to focus on the lines of strain cutting across his face and the beads of sweat gathering on his brow. "You feel so good." With a trembling hand, I gripped my rock-hard cock. I gathered up the cum leaking from the head and smeared it down the shaft. As I stroked myself, my hips raised, and I took in more of him, causing us both to gasp. "Yes," I hissed. My body adjusted to his girth, and I shoved aside the lingering bite of pain to wallow in the ecstasy of this moment. "More. I want all of you." Sebastian delivered. He steadily filled me up, giving me every sweet inch of his dick. When he was completely inside of me, the most beautiful look of bliss filled his face. I wanted to keep staring at him, but it became too difficult as he moved. Each thrust tried to knock the breath out of my lungs. My hips lifted to meet his while my hand shuttled on my cock faster and faster. As my pleasure built, my eyes fell shut and my head pressed into the pillows, allowing me to soak in everything I was feeling. My orgasm was so close now. I didn't want to fall off that cliff yet, but the combination of tender torment with the incredible pounding into my body was driving me insane. "Fuck," Sebastian growled, and my eyes popped open to see his gaze glued on the spot where our bodies met, as if it hypnotized him. "That's it, dearest," I purred. "Fuck me harder. I want everything you've got. Show me how much you want me." A snarl left my lover as he gripped my hip with his free hand and tilted my body just right so that on the next long, deep stroke, he punched my prostate, leaving me seeing stars. An electric current shot along my nerve endings and I was done. 2 more hard thrusts and I shouted as the ecstasy I'd been reaching for finally slammed through me. Hot, sticky cum splashed across my hand and over my stomach. My ass muscles clenched tight, but Sebastian didn't stop. The little devil even sped up, fucking me through my orgasm and straight into his. I barely managed to focus on him as he shouted his release. His expression twisted up in a way that almost looked as if he were in pain, but he finished with a loose, sloppy smile that squeezed my heart. With a final exhale, that giant man collapsed on top of me, his face nuzzled against my neck. We both panted like we'd run a marathon. That was amazing, Sebastian said in a rush of hot breath on my sweaty skin. Uh-huh, definitely need to do that again. Yes. Sebastian's head popped up. His hair was a sweaty mess, but his grin was a bright, shining star. I'd seen him in Savile Row suits and elegant tuxedos, but in this moment right here, I swore he'd never appeared more handsome to me. Frequently, anytime you want. I wanted to tease him, but as I opened my mouth, the only thing that came out was a yawn. Of course, Sebastian was full of energy, as if the orgasm had revived him. He carefully withdrew from my body and disappeared into the bathroom to deal with the condom. When he returned, he had a warm, damp washcloth he used to clean me up. After drying me off with a fluffy white towel, Sebastian climbed into bed with me and bundled us up in his silk sheets. I could feel myself drifting, my eyes growing heavy as I lay stretched out in his bed, his arm wrapped around my stomach. Sebastian was an oven next to me, but I didn't mind. Everything in me was so relaxed I didn't want to stir, but I knew I had to. With as much effort as I could muster, I cracked one eye open and my gaze landed on the digital clock on his nightstand. It was such a relic. Why would he need one? He probably always had his phone on his nightstand, except there was no need to grab my phone with that clock. That was why he had it. It was late, but not ridiculously so. If I left now, I wouldn't be in danger of falling asleep on my way home. I need to get going, I mumbled, still trying to find the energy to get my ass up. Sebastian's arm tightened on my waist to the point of dragging me across the bed so that I was flush with his body from head to toe. No, Sebastian growled into my hair. My body shook with silent laughter. I have to go. It's late. You don't have to go. You can sleep right here. There's plenty of room. I'll even let you have your own side of the bed. For part of the night. So generous, I teased. And it was tempting. His bed was ridiculously comfortable, the right balance of soft and firm. Not to mention staying would mean more amazing sex. I can't. I need to get up early tomorrow. Nope. Tomorrow's Saturday. I checked. You can sleep in. Carol will make you another delicious breakfast. I haven't even shown you my shower yet. It has 4 shower heads. We can shower at the same time, and I'll wash your back. Evil. This man was pure temptation. Can I take a rain check? I was planning to drive down to see Ronnie tomorrow, and his hospital's near Louisville. It wasn't a long drive, just a little more than an hour for me, but sometimes seeing Ronnie meant waiting for a few hours to make sure he was medicated properly and in a good headspace for visitors. Plus, I thought I'd pop in to check on my mom after seeing Ronnie. At best, it was going to be an exhausting day. It was better to start early so I could spend the rest of the evening recovering. Of course, no need for a rain check. Sebastian pressed kisses along the nape of my neck and across my shoulder. Each one stole away some of the tension that had entered my body at the thought of my plans for tomorrow. This spot is reserved for you permanently. Anytime you want to sleep right here, day or night, weekday or weekend, it's yours. That sounds really nice. Would you like me to go with you tomorrow? Not to meet your brother, to be there, maybe drive if you need a break. I squeezed my eyes shut against the sudden, unexpected sting of tears. My throat tightened, and for several seconds I could only lie there, soaking in the warmth of his offer. I shook my head and swallowed so I could speak. No, it's okay. I didn't deserve Sebastian Cortland. There probably wasn't anyone in the world who did. Even if he was simply on loan to me for a short time, I was going to enjoy this warmth and support while I could. Chapter 12. Byron Graham. I arrived at the Holy Mother Treatment Facility at 10 a.m. on Saturday, exactly when I wanted to. It was just after breakfast and late enough for Ronnie's morning meds to have kicked in properly. After snagging the box of cookies from the front passenger seat of my car, I strolled into the building that resembled pretty much every hospital I'd ever visited in my life. Off-white walls, fake plants, pastel landscapes, and durable, neutral-colored tile. With practiced ease, I strolled up to the reception desk and signed in. Jenny smiled and greeted me by name, not even bothering to look at the driver's license I'd pulled out for her. The older volunteer was a regular and knew me from my many visits over the years. She wrapped the bright green paper visitor band around my wrist while I broke the seal on the cookies. They were just a box of iced sugar cookies made by a local bakery that I'd picked up at the grocery this morning. Each time I came, I tried to bring something for the nursing staff on Ronnie's floor to show my appreciation for all their hard work. It's like you know exactly when I need a little treat for my day. Jenny giggled as she selected a cookie with bright yellow icing and a smiley face. I think we can all use a treat every day, I murmured as I closed the box. From the reception area, it was a short walk to the elevators, and then a quick ride up to the third floor. As the doors closed, my heart rate picked up and my stomach knotted. I'd been coming to visit Ronnie for as long as he'd lived here, for roughly 4 years, and the same old anxieties continued to creep in. Most of the time, I was here alone. Mom accompanied me a few times a year, even though I called her the day before each trip to give her a heads up that I'd be leaving for my next visit. She rarely returned my calls. It was horrible of me to think about it, but it hurt them both each time she came here. Her worst benders were always after a visit to see Ronnie, and my brother always had bad days following her visits. Maybe too many reminders of what should have been. At the third floor, I stepped out and turned to the right, following the long hallway to another small reception area that sat outside a pair of locked double doors. I grinned easily at the familiar face behind the desk. "Byron, I should have known I'd see you today," the nurse greeted. "Hi, Elaine. What are you doing here today? I thought you were off Saturdays." The 30-something with bright red hair sighed heavily. "Kevin had his first orthodontist appointment last week. Poor kid needs to have 2 teeth pulled and braces, so I'm here trying to work some overtime for braces." I winced. "And you thought you were done with braces after Kristen got hers off." "I should have known better," she muttered as she picked up the phone. "Let me call back to see if Ronnie's ready for guests. Just have a seat for a sec, hon." I placed the box of cookies on the reception desk. "For you and the rest of the team, if you don't mind passing them along." She clicked her tongue at me. "I know you've been told you don't need to do that," she said, even as she pulled the box off to the side. "I do it because I want to." While she chatted with a nurse in Ronnie's ward, I sat in one of the plastic chairs with a thin cushion, trying to refrain from pulling out my phone to check for work emails. This was the one time I needed to be fully present, no thoughts about work or anything else. Except maybe Sebastian. For the first time in my life, I wished I'd brought someone else. I wished Sebastian were sitting next to me in one of these uncomfortable chairs, holding my hand as we waited to be shown back. He would have filled my ear with silly talk about a bunch of nonsense or even work talk, anything to keep my mind from worrying about things I had no control over. Sebastian would like Ronnie. He'd know how to talk to Ronnie. The man could talk to anyone and everyone with complete ease. Without a doubt, he and Ronnie would be fast friends inside of 5 minutes. And maybe that was the problem. What if Ronnie saw Sebastian as a friend and we didn't work out? Ronnie wouldn't be able to understand why Sebastian wasn't coming to visit him any longer. He would be crushed, feeling utterly abandoned by Sebastian through no fault of his own. As much as I now wanted to introduce Sebastian to Ronnie, it was better to wait. If we actually made a relationship work, if we were truly boyfriends and we had a future together, I would bring Sebastian here. But not yet. It was far too soon. Still, it would have been nice to have him here, holding my hand. "Byron?" Elaine said, breaking into my wandering thoughts. I instantly leaped to my feet, my heart freezing until I saw her smile. "You can go on in. He's in the day room. He's having a good day." The tension that had seized my chest released, and I felt like I could breathe again. With a nod, I walked to the doors that buzzed as I approached them, signaling that she'd unlocked them for my entry. Stepping inside Ronnie's ward was like stepping into a magical world. The walls were painted more colors, even though the palette remained soft and comforting. There were more pictures of animated characters, and the furniture was more comfortable. A round nurse's station sat in the center of the main hallway, while large open rooms sat on the left and right. The day rooms, where the residents could mingle with each other, watch TV, or take part in various planned activities. Past the day rooms were 2 long hallways that contained some other therapy rooms, along with the residents' private quarters. A couple of the nurses waved to me in greeting and pointed me toward the right, where I located Ronnie sitting at a table with the jumbled pieces of a puzzle. "Hey, Ronnie," I said, infusing a boatload of excitement and joy into my voice, while part of me ached to see him like this, even after all this time. Ronnie was now 33, but there were already gray hairs showing in his short, dark brown hair. He was pudgy and so damn tall, probably even taller than Sebastian. My brain kept screaming that he was supposed to be married with kids by now. I'd have seen him on weekends between his fishing trips, and he'd have complained about his job or his wife wanting a new car. Instead, he stared at me for a second with a vacant look, and I worried he didn't recognize me. It wouldn't be the first time. If he didn't, I was preparing to play it off that I was an old friend. Trying to explain that I was his little brother was too stressful for him. But a heartbeat later, his face split into a wide grin and he threw out his arms. "Byron!" When I hugged him, he pulled me in tight, nearly cracking 2 of my ribs and lifting me off my feet, but I didn't fucking care. He remembered me and loved me. That was enough. He could break all the ribs he wanted so long as he remembered me. "Byron, I have a puzzle. Help me do the puzzle." With a smile spreading from ear to ear, I grabbed an empty chair and pulled it over so that I was right beside him. It was the same puzzle I'd helped him put together a few dozen times, of a boy sitting in a boat fishing while some ducks swam by. It was only 100 pieces, and I'd tried to get him some other ones, but this was his favorite. If he was happy, what did it matter? My job was to find the next piece that he wanted, and he would fit it into place, then lock it with a slam of his fist. It was the same process we always used, and I loved it. As we worked, he told me about his breakfast and what he watched on TV yesterday, and a bunch of other rambling stories. I couldn't follow it completely. Since his accident, Ronnie had developed a way of speaking where everything sort of ran together. It was like reading a book with no punctuation or paragraph breaks. He would slam 2 different stories together, and it was on me to realize that he'd changed subjects. Thankfully, he just needed me to make occasional noises of agreement, or sometimes ask a question to prod him along. The moment the puzzle was done at last, we threw our hands up in the air and cheered. For a time, I forgot about my pain and frustration on Ronnie's behalf and just enjoyed our time together. Even if his life hadn't worked out how we'd all thought it would, Ronnie was still happy. He was still alive and enjoying the things around him. He had friends in the hospital, nurses and doctors he cared about. I needed to stop being so broken-hearted for him and embrace his life the way it was. "Byron, when is Dad going to come take me fishing again?" Ronnie suddenly inquired, demolishing the positive thoughts I'd cobbled together. A knot formed in my throat, and my brain scrambled for something to say. Our father had died of a heart attack more than 5 years ago. He'd been living at home with my parents at the time. He knew Dad was dead, but for some reason it seemed to slip away from him constantly. Not that I could blame him. Dad had been a lot of the glue that held our family together. He was the one who'd kept my mother's drinking under control and had corralled Ronnie while I was attending undergraduate and then graduate school. Dad had kept us feeling like a family. Oddly enough, he almost never asked about our mother, as if he'd swapped in his mind which of them had passed away. I don't know, I forced out while desperately holding on to my smile. I'll have to talk to him about it. My voice cracked, but I didn't think he noticed. Have you drawn anything new in art class? Yes, come see. Ronnie jumped to his feet and pulled me along with him. Wait, we need to clean up the puzzle first. Did you take a picture of it? You have to take a picture on your phone. It was our tradition. I always took a picture of the finished puzzle with my phone, which was why I now had over 100 pictures of this same puzzle on my phone. I'd tried to take some with Ronnie in the frame, but he always demanded that I erase those. The picture could be only the puzzle. Once it was taken, Ronnie pulled my phone close so he could double-check it. From there, I showed him some new filters that changed his face or put bunny ears on our heads. We passed a solid hour that way, laughing and staring at the little screen on my phone. When the nurses called lunchtime, I said my goodbyes. It was always easier to leave then because he had the distraction of food. A planned activity always followed lunch, helped him forget that I'd left for the day. We hugged, and he tried to crack another rib. I stood alone, watching as Ronnie walked with a nurse, excitedly chatting her up about how he'd had floppy dog ears in a picture on my phone. The world had a bittersweet sharpness to it now, as I desperately clung to the reminder that he was happy. That was all that mattered. Ronnie was happy. Except I needed to move him from Holy Mother because Ronnie wasn't always happy and he was a strain on their system. Ronnie was comfortable here, and the staff loved him. They took great care of him, but the extra time and care needed to handle him meant time they were spending away from other patients who needed their attention. Giving Hope Long-Term Care Facility was 50 miles down the road, and they could more than manage Ronnie's needs without the strain. Dr. Willard had suggested it more than once, and I trusted his opinion. The best part was that he could still be part of Ronnie's care team, since he worked at both locations. After sucking in a deep breath, I steeled myself for the long walk to my car. The tears that I'd held back were kind enough to wait until I was sitting in the driver's seat. Seeing Ronnie still hurt. I wanted the best for him. I wanted him to have the life he'd dreamed about. The football star with the hot girlfriend. He'd had plans to attend a technical school after he graduated high school. He'd still been deciding between being an auto mechanic and an electrician when he was in that accident. Maybe he wouldn't have been a billionaire, but he would have had a damn good life. If not for that stupid accident. With a shuddering breath, I roughly wiped away my ridiculous tears. Ronnie didn't need my tears, or someone feeling bad for him. He needed someone to look out for his best interests, someone to make sure he could live the best life possible. That was my fucking job. And thanks to my bargain with Sebastian, I had 3 years banked for Ronnie at Giving Hope. Maybe I could talk to Sebastian about getting an advance on that first year. There was a lot of planning to be done, but if we started now, we could get Ronnie moved to his new home and improved care within the next month. Yes, this was a good first step. Chapter 13. Sebastian Cortland. Monday arrived far too quickly. I never got the chance to see Byron again during the weekend. He'd texted me once in the early evening on Saturday to say that he'd arrived home from visiting his family and that he was going to bed, but he'd at least ended the day with 3 amazing words. I miss you. On Sunday, I had a few of my own obligations to deal with, namely visiting with my sister and her family. It was good to see my niece, but I couldn't deny that I very much wanted to escape to see Byron. But in the blink of an eye, the weekend was over, and I was back to being the boss. Normally, that wasn't a bad thing. I enjoyed being the CEO of Cortland Enterprises, leading us to bigger and better things. The problem was that I couldn't be the boss and Byron's boyfriend. Or rather, I couldn't be his boss and his boyfriend. Things appeared to be progressing in the right direction. It wasn't just me initiating things. He'd taken the time to text me first on Sunday, sending along some playful, non-work-related memes. Maybe Declan was right in that I needed to start taking steps to protect Byron in the event we decided that dating and being in an actual relationship was in the cards for us. Unfortunately, that next step was preparing for him to no longer be my assistant, which I dreaded both personally and professionally. He was my rock. He was the one who steadied me on those crazy, frantic days. Byron was the one who made me smile first thing in the morning, And it wasn't just because I was hopelessly infatuated with him. Not to mention, the man was a mind reader. He always seemed to know what I wanted before I asked for it. He was fast, efficient, and professional. As far as I knew, all the managers and executives loved him. He'd be a rock star no matter where in the company he ended up. You don't have any managers scheduled for a lunch meeting? Is there anyone you'd like me to reach out to and see if they're available? Byron's gentle but firm voice broke through my mental meandering, pulling me back to what we were doing. My schedule, meetings, planning. Can't I have you for lunch? Byron narrowed his eyes at me over the edge of his tablet in a look that was half warning and half hunger, like he couldn't decide whether to punish or devour me. I was happy to enjoy either option. I need to run a brief errand during my lunch hour today. If you don't want to have a specific lunch meeting, is there something you'd like me to have delivered today? I waved my hand, my gaze wandering to my calendar on one screen. Nah, I'll figure it out later. You have a lengthy break following lunch, and I've marked that as time to review the Paris contracts. Already done. I have one more thing to check, then they'll be ready to be turned into legal. The Leisure Division's cost-cutting plan? I nodded. Yes, that'll be this afternoon, along with the Canadian marketing plan for the new winter gear. Got it. Byron stood, tucking his tablet under his arm. If there's nothing else, I'll go finish my final preparations for this morning's meetings, and actually, I was thinking, I said, as an idea formed. I want Kaylin to accompany me to the meetings during the first half of my day and handle the note-taking. I glanced up to see Byron wobble and reach back as if to catch himself on the chair he'd risen from, but he remained standing. His eyes were wide, and new lines of strain snaked across his brow and bracketed his mouth. I'm sorry, sir. Is there a problem? No problem. Byron swallowed hard, and I frowned. But if I've done something to make you dissatisfied with my performance, I didn't say that. I think that it's time we gave Kaylin some more experience in tackling other tasks. This will also give him a better understanding of the company. Besides, I'm sure you have plenty of other tasks that are demanding your attention. The break from meetings will be nice for you. Except Byron didn't look grateful for the break. I couldn't quite explain what his mood was. Strangled? Confused? That had to be it. Byron wasn't a fan of changing the schedule, but Kaylin needed more experience, especially if he was going to one day replace Byron as my assistant. There was no time like the present to get that training in. Of course. I will talk to him. Wait a second. I held up my hand, cutting him off. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to brush this under the rug. Something was wrong. Was it that I was including Kaylin, or was there something else that was bothering him? Talk to me. You have a problem with this, but I don't understand. We talked about it, right? If we're going to date, you'll need to move to another position within the company. I'm still going to need an assistant. Kaylin would be the best choice to slide into that role, right? Byron's eyes became so wide while his pale cheeks turned pink. That's what you're thinking? He demanded in a harsh whisper. Yes. What were you thinking? That you were mad at me. That you were disappointed in my work and wanted Kaylin to handle it because you had more confidence in his work. My mouth just hung open. The thought had never crossed my mind. Never. The quality of your work has never wavered, and if it did, I'd talk to you about it. I wouldn't just replace you. Byron scrubbed a hand across his face before just staring down at his tablet. I'm sorry, sir. I don't know what's come over me. Byron, I murmured, and then pulled the friend egg out of my pocket. As I held it up to him, he shot me a dark look, but I wasn't deterred. Seriously, are you okay? You can't keep pulling that out at work, he growled. I waggled my eyebrows at him. It's better than me pulling out other things. Byron hissed and glanced across the room at the open door. Sebastian, behave yourself. You promised. Fine. But are you okay? I repeated, holding the egg in front of me. I wasn't putting it away until I got a proper answer. He huffed. I'm fine. Just distracted, I think. It was a hectic weekend. That wasn't a great answer, but I knew there was no point in trying to pursue this in the office. Thankfully, we were supposed to have a dinner date tonight. I could get to the bottom of what had happened over the weekend and try to help him feel better. Okay, we'll talk later, I murmured, wondering if we could chat prior to lunch, even as I stuffed the egg into my pocket. I hadn't expected to use it today, but it was a good thing I'd brought it. Byron cleared his throat and turned his attention back to his tablet. I'll give Kaylin a heads up about the meeting. Also, the agenda for the 10:30 meeting states that various departments will give brief proposals for new products. There was an idea that I wanted to present, if there was time. That was unexpected. Byron had never made a proposal before. I wasn't even sure how the other managers would take that. Would they think he'd get preferential treatment because he was my assistant? Is there a specific department or division you've been working with? No, sir. This is an independent idea that stretches across several divisions. Send me the proposal. I'll review it. If I think it's good enough, I'll move it along to the final decision stage for discussion. Oh. That didn't sound like a good oh, but I wasn't sure how to explain that I was trying to save him some pain. He seemed so fragile from our other misunderstanding that I didn't want to stomp on his sensitive feelings. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance because Byron nodded once. I'll go inform Kaylin that he needs to prepare for the meetings and what he needs to do. My assistant turned sharply on his heel and left my office, but there was a sinking feeling in my stomach that things were still off between us. My eyes burned and my neck was stiff. After the meetings, there was endless report reading and making notes for suggestions. I was ready for it to be done, to head home. No. Dinner. I had dinner plans with Byron tonight, date number 4. How could I have forgotten? It should have been the thing to keep me buzzing all day, but it had slipped my mind. Byron hadn't been there to remind me about it, though. In fact, I'd barely seen him all day. Kaylin and I shuffled to the top floor after the morning meetings to find that Byron had already left for his lunch break errand. I had only a brief message waiting to remind me to eat, along with his proposal. When I returned from my lunch, he was back at his desk, but on the phone with someone, and I couldn't interrupt him. That seemed to go on for the rest of the day, with me constantly missing him. But the day was finished, and we could catch up during a quiet dinner. As I was getting the chance to shut down my computer for the night, there was a knock on my door. Byron stepped in, looking as tired as I felt, with a new stack of contracts for me to review. Legal department dropped these off. I've marked the places where the changes were made per your instructions, Byron announced as he brought over the papers and sat them on the edge of my desk. Thank you. The smile that had been missing from my lips returned as I watched him. I feel like I haven't seen you all day. It's been a busy day, sir. Kaylin did fantastic this morning. You've done a great job training him. The little wrinkle between his brows smoothed. I'm pleased to hear that you're happy with his performance, but I can't take credit. Kaylin is very intelligent and eager to learn everything he can about Cortland Enterprises. We're lucky to have him. Are you done for the day? Ready for dinner? Byron stared at me, and I got the impression that he'd forgotten we had a dinner date planned. His eyelids widened a heartbeat later, and I swore I could almost hear the memory clicking in his brain. I've a few things left I need to see to before I can leave for the evening. Did you have a chance to review my proposal this afternoon? I sat back in my chair and spun it toward my monitor as I turned over the best way to give him my thoughts. Straightforward had to be the best way. This was work, and I'd always been honest with Byron. I don't think it's the best option, I stated, looking him dead in the eye. A muscle in Byron's jaw ticked, and the silence stretched between us for several seconds until Byron nodded once. Could you please elaborate on where my proposal falls short? He asked, and there was no missing the tightness in his voice. It's not the direction that we want to go. While I think your proposal has some merits, I don't believe that it's going to provide the results we need in order to salvage the company without us needing to institute a hiring freeze and layoffs. I held out my open hands to Byron, keeping my tone firm but gentle. We need to hit a home run. Base hits won't cut it. But base hits are easier to get than a home run. If you put together enough base hits, you can still score. That's how the game is won. With your proposal, it's an all-or-nothing endeavor that possesses much higher risks for everyone. My way offers lower risks. Your proposal also comes with lower reward potential, I replied. It doesn't have to. If we mobilize quickly to capitalize on an obvious winner, the rewards stand to be as great as with your home run. No, I appreciate your proposal, but I don't believe it will work. Something flashed in Byron's eyes, like the world was crashing down and it was all my fault. I didn't know what to do. As his boyfriend, I wanted to fix everything, but as his boss, I couldn't waver on this. Right? Excuse me, sir, he said in a rough voice. Thank you for your time. Byron, if you don't mind, I need to cancel our plans this evening. I'm not feeling too well. I'll be leaving for the night. With my heart in my throat, I jumped out of my seat and came around my desk, darting in front of him to block his path to the door. Pinching the marble egg between two fingers, I held it in front of his face. Please talk to me. You've been off all day. I just want to understand so I can help. Byron stared at the egg and released a long, low sigh. His shoulders slumped even farther. I appreciate what you're trying to do. The egg can remind me to treat you as a friend, but it can't force me to talk about things I don't wish to discuss. Some things I just need to work out on my own. He stepped past me and continued to the door, but he didn't get more than a step before he stopped again. I looked past him to see Declan standing in the opening watching us. Forgive me, Mr. Foster. Is there anything I can get you? Byron asked, snapping into perfect assistant mode. No, thank you. I just needed to talk to Sebastian. Byron nodded. Have a good evening. He slipped past Declan and closed the door behind my friend. The moment we were alone, Declan turned his glare full force onto me. What did you do? What the hell? Why do you assume I did something? I haven't done anything. At least I didn't think I'd done anything to him. Fuck, I hope I hadn't. This has nothing to do with us dating, I added, because I was sure it was exactly what he was thinking. Declan stood in front of me, his arms folded over his chest as he continued to glare. What's wrong? We had a small misunderstanding this morning when I chose to have Kaylin in the meetings instead of him, but I explained it was to train Kaylin ahead of moving Byron to another position because we're dating. He said he understood, but he's been distracted. I'm guessing something happened this past weekend that he's not telling me about. That's it. I shrugged one shoulder as I walked to my desk and dropped into his chair. I turned down his proposal. The proposal about focusing on mini-blockbuster limited edition products for each of our divisions? Declan inquired. That question jolted me upright in my chair. He showed it to you? Byron had made it sound like he'd not shown any of the other members of the executive team. We discussed it. He came to me to get some specific financial numbers to make sure his idea was workable to match our needs. And it's not, I stated, relaxing again. It is, but it wouldn't be easy. There are risks. Exactly, I said, waving a hand at Declan. I'd known my CFO would back me on this. Declan was all logic and common sense. However, there are fewer risks involved than with your plan. I lunged forward in my chair, almost coming out of my seat as I shrieked, What? Declan shrugged and raised a hand. Your plan of putting everything on a single home-run product comes with inherent problems. If it bombs, if we misread the market, we're in a worse position than we are in now. If it wins, we win big, which will help carry us comfortably into the new year. My friend then lifted his other hand, holding it next to the other like a set of scales. By contrast, Byron's plan hinges on modifications to existing, successful products. It's a lower-cost investment for the company. If his plan fails, we don't have the cushion to carry us into the new year, but we will still finish in a better position than we are in now. If his plan wins, it can be easily expanded, and our marketing departments can mobilize fast enough to turn it into a home run. So you agree with him? My friend glared at me, his frown deepening. I didn't say that. I tried not to snarl at my oldest friend. Sometimes getting him to spit out what he was thinking was exhausting. Byron already wasn't talking to me. Declan's reticence was not helping. Two things. First, maybe part of the reason Byron came up with the proposal was to prove that he is capable of holding a more important position in the company than just being your executive assistant. You do recall that he has a master's degree, correct? You're talking about moving him to another department. Even as my assistant, it's something of a demotion compared to working for the CEO, and all because he made the mistake of dating you. Fuck. I exhaled. That had never crossed my mind. In truth, the best option would be for Byron to leave Cortland and find another position somewhere else, but I didn't want to force him out. If I were a good, thoughtful boyfriend, though, I'd be helping him to make that transition if it was what he wanted. Second, Declan continued, as if he hadn't just rocked my poor little world. As his boyfriend, you should have left with him, taken him home and done things to make sure he felt cared for and safe until he was willing to tell you what was wrong. Then you would solve the problem together instead of leaving him to deal with it alone. I stared at Declan, utterly speechless, my brain reduced to white noise. How the hell do you know that? You know nothing about relationships. You couldn't date your way out of a paper bag. I learned it from you. You're the one who said everyone wants to be taken care of, even grumpy assholes like Pierce. And Byron isn't half as grumpy as Pierce can be. He was right. Very, very right. When Byron had canceled our dinner date, I should have followed him home and offered to take care of him. At the very least, grabbed a fucking bucket of fried chicken and offered to cuddle him until he felt better. I needed to fix this. As I jumped to my feet, I snagged my phone, wallet, and keys. Whatever brought you here, send it in an email or tell Kaylin to make you my first meeting of the day. I need to go talk to Byron now. Fine. Just try to be less of an idiot. Yes, that was the goal. Chapter 14. Byron Graham. Fucking jackass. I sat on the floor of my apartment, my back against the mini fridge, glaring at the floor. Upon returning home, I'd changed out of my suit, thrown on my most comfortable clothes, and dropped to the ground, not knowing what to do with myself next. I was a fucking jackass. What a horrible day. But that was to be expected after a shit weekend. The visit with Ronnie hadn't been bad, but it had hit home that I needed to figure out something for his situation. I was reluctant to pull him out of Holy Mother because I didn't want to cause him any kind of distress, but it was what he needed. Giving Hope long-term care facility could provide him with the kind of care and attention he needed to live his best life possible. After a lackluster visit with my mother on Saturday, I'd passed that night and all day Sunday working through all the information Sebastian's people had gathered regarding government grants and other kinds of financial support. Of course, I'd already banked 3 years of care thanks to Sebastian, and we'd had another date scheduled for tonight, which would have given me 4 years. But I couldn't go through with it. Not tonight. My head was a mess and my heart ached. How could I go out on a date with Sebastian when I couldn't give him the full attention that he deserved? Some wicked part of my brain argued that I should have sucked it up and done it for Ronnie. No, that was wrong. I wasn't using Sebastian for his money, and I wasn't selling myself for my brother. We hadn't hit that level of desperation yet. But I'd started crunching numbers over the weekend, assuming that Sebastian did only give me enough money for 3 years. I'd made notes on how I could use it for my brother, stretching every fucking penny until they nearly snapped like a rubber band. Then I made notes on the ways I could spend my money that I wasn't using on Ronnie to help my mother. I looked into nurses who would visit her house a few times a week, rehab programs, and assisted living facilities. The sad part was that no matter how I worked it, my dollars didn't stretch quite far enough. There was never any wiggle room for an emergency, such as my car breaking down or needing to buy a new laptop. God help me if something happened that required me to go into the hospital.